Good afternoon and welcome to our weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield News Anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us is University of Missouri's Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
All right, as we take a look at this weekend market, let's start first and recap some of the big news and the big movements that we've seen on the livestock side.
Yeah, when you look at prices this week, so I'll start on the cash hog side. You know, every week of 2017, we've seen higher cash hog prices until this week. So for the first week in 2017, we're off about $3 on cash hog prices. Feeder cattle are also steady to $4 lower for the week. So a little bit of weakness occurring in both cattle and hog sides of the equation. I will say when you look at futures markets, midweek we were up pretty strong across the board on fed cattle, for example, up about $3 relative to where we started the week. Yet by today, we're almost backed off all of those gains, so we're fairly flat on futures for the week. When you look at wholesale markets, we saw the wholesale choice beef cutout value up for the week about $11 a hundred. We saw the pork wholesale cutout value actually down about a little less than $2 a hundred relative to the week, and I will say that was driven very much by what we saw going on with lower belly prices as we went through the week. So lower belly prices are starting to take their toll on the overall cutout value on the pork side.
Scott, you bring up the wholesale beef side of things. Where are we seeing the big driver on that?
Yeah, so when you look at what's been going on, the middle meats have certainly been where we've seen some strength. Loins and ribs both have shown some very good growth. And now across the board, we're up on all of the different cuts that make up that beef cutout value. But it kind of makes me wonder with what's been a pretty good last few days for many parts of the country, whether that itch to get out to grill for the first time this year has been driving any kind of demand short term here for some higher quality beef cuts.
Could an early grilling season give us a little bit of a bump on that side of the market?
Absolutely, I think it could. I think many of us are looking for that first opportunity to get outside. And when you look at many parts of the country where normally they might still have snow on the ground, and the fact that the grass might be green in some of those places just reminds us that we are starting the spring pretty early. And that may have given us some nice demand pop that we haven't seen in for a while now. I remind us we start early. That might mean demand's not quite as robust a little later in the spring when we normally start to see that start of grilling season start. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out over the longer term.
Scott, as we take a look at some of the reports this week, the Restaurant Performance Index was released. What did we see there, and what indications does it have for the livestock side?
Yes, I go really important, I think, to the overall mix of things, what we got from the Restaurant Performance Index. So for January, the overall index was actually down 0.4% relative to the previous month, yet it was still above 100. Above 100 tells us we're still talking about expansion. The makeup of that index, though, is very important. When we look at the current situation index, we were actually down relative to the previous month, yet the expectations showed really flat month over month. So it tells me the current situation maybe is not as good as maybe we had hoped, but there's still a lot of anticipation that future demand will be good. When we look at that Restaurant Performance Index, we need continued growth in that Restaurant Performance Index as we move ahead over the next few months.
Demand really has still been strong overall for most U.S. livestock or meat products. As we look at some of that, how are we seeing continued strength? Are we seeing it build, or how is that shaping up as we kick off this year?
Yeah, so I think we certainly started the year with pretty good strength. I kind of worry that maybe we're losing a little bit of the wind out of the sails of domestic demand for meat in this country, and I think we all know if that continues to unfold, what happens on the price side. It gets a lot harder on the price side. Now that's really the domestic side of the market, where maybe it's hard to continue every month showing what's been very strong growth. So we'll have to wait and see how things play out. But that domestic market, the demand strength has been good. It's just unfortunate that I think we're starting to see a few signs maybe that it's slowing down just a little bit.
We talk about the importance of domestic demand, foreign demand, exports, trade are still key in that. How are we seeing those shape up as we start to look at some of that weekly export data?
Yeah, so the weekly export data that's available to us in my book says we're continuing to see very strong beef and pork export growth. Mexico being important to that, Japan, Korea, all those markets have been up, it would appear, as we look at the first couple of months of data. Now, I like to remind us when we're comparing January of 2017 to January of 2016, if you remember back to January of 2016, we were coming from some lower levels. So yes, we have 20-25% growth in some of those markets year over year, but we're coming off some fairly low levels back in 2016. So as we continue to move through 2017, we may have trouble seeing that same kind of growth. As you recall, we got some nice recovery in terms of export expansion as we move through 2016. So it'll make it harder as we go through 2017 to continue those kind of double-digit growths, I believe.
And even maintaining, I mean, I would think that with the current rhetoric around NAFTA, I'm at Commodity Classic this week in San Antonio, Texas, corn and soybean growers and wheat growers are all talking about the impact that renegotiations could potentially have on markets. That's going to carry over to the livestock side as well, right?
Absolutely. And I remind us, we do not want to lose markets, any export markets right now for beef and pork, given that, again, we're going to put another 3% increase in meat supplies out in the marketplace this year. We need to find homes internationally for a good portion of that growth if we want to talk about reasonable prices for producers. I continue to worry that, if we talk about a complete shutdown or collapse of a market, that's enough to drive both beef and pork prices much lower than what producers have been used to so far in 2017.
Scott, you briefly mentioned the warmer weather and what it's doing maybe to increase grilling demand and on that side of things this early in the year. We're seeing a lot of field activities. We hosted a stage show here at Commodity Classic, and a soybean grower from Illinois was telling us that there were corn acres, albeit small acres, but there was still acreage going into corn. What does that mean as we look ahead to USDA's Prospective Plantings report at the end of the month?
Yeah, so I will say there's a lot of anhydrous tanks that have been moving around the roads of Missouri over the last couple of weeks with what's been warmer weather, and then albeit a little dry in some parts of the state of Missouri. It seems to me that all else equal, the early start here may suggest a few more corn acres than we otherwise would have gotten. And I know we continue to talk about the battle between soybean and corn acres as we move through 2017, and relative prices might have suggested some shift towards soybeans and away from corn. But given the early spring, it tells me that we might get a few more corn acres out there than we otherwise would have thought. And that, from a livestock perspective, ought to keep a lid on corn prices, I believe, as long as we don't have a drought as we go through 2017.
Scott, as we look ahead to next Friday, some of the big reports that we'll be talking about next week.
Yeah, so we're going to get monthly trade out next week, so we can talk a little bit more about the trade data that comes from USDA. We'll also get a USDA monthly crop outlook report. So we'll see WASDE next week as well. That will give us another glimpse of where USDA sees crop and livestock producers and prices going for 2017.
All right, Scott, anything else?
I think we've covered the important things for this week, Megan.
All right, we will talk to you again next Friday. A reminder, if you'd like your market information delivered to you twice a day, visit brownfieldagnews.com and check out John Perkins's Market Minute, and to have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, go to brownfieldagnews.com, click on subscribe, and you can also submit questions and comments to Scott and myself there. Have a great weekend. I'm Megan Grebner on Brownfield.